Hi, Rory Stuart here, and I'm making this clip to try to clarify a topic about which there's a lot of confusion and misinformation on the internet, and that topic is polyrhythms. So let's begin. Imagine we've got an underlying cycle. It's got a certain number of beats at a certain rate. Let's say it's 4/4. Okay, so it's got 4 beats like that. So one thing we can have is something where there's a pattern on top of it that happens at a different rate than those beats. And a rate that's not just a division or multiple of those. So imagine, for example, it's going like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you hear that the pattern I'm playing on top of that is 5 in the time of 4. So that's called a rhythmic superimposition. And I'm going to relate this to polyrhythms in a second. A completely different thing that can happen is where there's a pattern where the rate of notes in the pattern is an even division or multiple of the underlying beats, but the length of this pattern is not an even multiple. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if I did it by singing it, da 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 da. Now I'm playing or singing a 7/8 cross rhythm, a 7/8 pattern that keeps repeating across the bar line, and that's called a cross rhythm. So these two things shouldn't be confused, they're quite distinct. When people use the word polyrhythm, the most technically correct thing they mean by that is what I'm calling a rhythmic superimposition. But be wary, because sometimes people get it confused and they use polyrhythm to mean what in the classical world they would call polymeter, and that's what I'm calling cross rhythms. By the way, polymeter itself is funny in the classical world. If you write the different instruments' parts showing different meters, that's called explicit polymeter. And if you write the entire score where you're showing the same meter, but one of the parts, or more than one of the parts, is playing a pattern that doesn't evenly divide the meter and repeats, as we just showed, they would call that implicit polymeter. But in the jazz contemporary world, we're just going to call this cross rhythm. So, polyrhythm best is used to describe rhythmic superimposition, sometimes is misused to describe cross rhythm, and by the way, sometimes polymeter is multiple meters, polyrhythm, multiple rhythms. Sometimes people use that even to describe a part in a score in the orchestra where all of the rhythms by the different instruments are not the same. Some people are playing one rhythm, some people are playing another rhythm. So the word or term polyrhythm is sometimes pretty vague, and if you want to be really clear, just talk about rhythmic superimposition, cross rhythms, and you're cool. If you're new to this material, I hope this introduction is helpful, but if you want to get more deeply into it, I hope you'll check out a series of books I wrote. This volume of the rhythm book is all about cross rhythms on 4/4, and you can also have cross rhythms on odd meters, and that's discussed in depth in this volume. And finally, we talked about rhythmic superimposition and subdivision, as well as some other topics in this volume. So check them out.